My name is Brooke Sprowl, and today I have Colin Scotland joining me. Colin has been a mentor of mine, both in business and it really evolved into more of a spiritual partnership and mentorship, and just through our shared kind of connection and what evolved in our process. And one of the things that struck me most about Colin the moment I met him was his kindness. And I expected to jump on this super salesy, high pressure call. And he was just so gracious and so kind and so generous with his time and his expertise. And it really modeled for me a new paradigm for marketing, this like just genuine disposition of service. And I've just been so grateful for all the ways that Colin has helped me both personally and professionally. So Colin, welcome.
Thank you so much. What a delightful introduction. Thank you, Brooke. I'm honored.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background before we get into things.
Oh, where to start, hey? I grew up in Liverpool, England, and spent my youth on the market stalls of Liverpool with my dad. That was how he earned his living, and that was a fun experience, I can tell you. Watching how the market traders kind of get people to buy things off the stall and scratching a living really, but it was interesting. It was an education and something that kind of shaped who I am today from that very early age. And that was the genesis of my interest in buying, how we buy things. These guys would be sat on an empty stall, no way to pay their rent, and they would shout and make signs and do all kinds of wacky things to get people interested. And it was it was a real became the beginnings of a real fascination for me. And that was really where my interest in all of the whole marketing sphere started.
Mm. And when we first jumped on our call, you asked me why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you, why do you want to scale? Why do you have these ambitions? And it kind of stopped me in my tracks. This was several years ago now. And I was like, I don't know why. Well, why? Why am I doing this? I'm not just trying to make more money. I'm not just, and it really kind of sent me into a little bit of an existential spiral where I began to really rethink a lot of what I was doing and why. And that was the genesis for My Truest North, which we recently launched. And just kind of this new desire to be in service. I mean, I've always had the desire to be in service, but to really think purposefully about how can I be in greatest service of the world. So I'm going to turn the question around on you and ask you, what's your why, Colin?
Oh, what a wonderful question. So I think mine is really simple, and it is. I'll tell it you through a story, right? So for a number of years, I've practiced jujitsu, the martial art of jujitsu. And I was teaching a class probably 8 years ago or so now with this young guy, and we pick people up and throw them down on the ground, right? For those that don't know. And this young kid, he just wasn't getting the move, right? He just wasn't doing it. He was trying to put his body in the right place. And I was like, move your left leg. No, your other left leg, right? He was like bumbling through the move. Just couldn't get it, getting really frustrated with himself. And I was guiding him and helping him, and he did this throw, and it was beautiful. It lifted the guy up, dropped him down on the floor, and he came up from that move, and his eyes, there was a light in his eyes, Brooke. And in that moment, he changed. It was like he came alive, and I could see in his eyes this brightness, this newness of, wow, I can do that. And I came away from that class feeling great that not great that I'd taught him how to do this move, but more of something that stuck with me. It was like that light in people's eyes when they go, I can do that, and that was something in that, was like a light bulb moment for me. And it just really connected with me with the thing that I feel like I'm here to do. And that is to help people to kind of have that light in their eyes and go, I can do that. you know?
Right, right. That's so beautiful. And I love that story. And I think that was a lot of my experience with you too. Like, oh wow, I can actually do these things. There's actually, and it was both the kind of philosophical and spiritual inquiry, but it was coupled with practical skills to implement, right? And that's part of the way
Mm,
that's part of the empowerment is we need both the kind of spiritual awakening component, but we also need these, skills and principles for implementation and execution. And that's one of the reasons why working with you has been so rich and meaningful for me. And I'm curious too. I guess I'm reflecting on something I think about a lot is how business can be spiritual. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or anything to share on that, because as I mentioned, that's really been my experience with you. And I think you've said that's been an experience that you've had with a lot of your clients. And, I had no idea you were a spiritual guy. I was enrolled in your nurture sequence, and, I didn't realize that we had that in common. So it was really interesting how that emerged and how you find people halfway across the globe, and it feels really orchestrated. So do you have a sense of, how you see business as spiritual?
I think everything is spiritual, whether we see it or we realize it or not. Everything is energy. Everything is making an interaction in the invisible that we're not cognizant of all the time. And so we see in glimpses these invisible forces that are at play in the world. And yet we are presented with this material, physical realm that is just a tiny fraction of what it means to exist, what it means to be alive. And so the realization that in a small way, how you show up in the world, the intention you set before you even take an action, that has such a powerful impact on your experience in the day, but also your influence on others as you move through the day. So to try and just be all matter of fact about things without an acknowledgement of the spiritual, I think is just leaving so much undone.
Yeah. How more than what, right? I mean, there's
Mm,
such an emphasis on achievement, outcome, productivity, the end. And how do we bring ourselves back into a more soulful and present way of relating with our lives, with our goals, even? I mean, I've been kind of in constant conversation with these goals and dreams and so motivated and inspired. And how do I stay really, really present and grounded and grateful and kind in that pursuit? I think there's a way that we can really find this optimal balance where the future is energizing us, but it's not taking us away. We're not waiting for this future time when, oh, I'm going to be happy. We're actually
mm,
inspired in the present by our North Star while still being fully awake and embodied in our values. And that was one of the questions I came into this call with, because one of the things I really admire in you and in general is, as I said before, your kindness. And so I'm curious, what practices, you know, what can we do to cultivate that? How did you develop that, and what guidance can you offer me in terms of cultivating my own kindness?
so it's not an easy thing, right? I love that saying by Buddha: before enlightenment, chopping wood, fetching water; after enlightenment, chopping wood, fetching water, right? So there's like you mentioned before, there's a practical, like a practice element, a doing, but also a being as well. And I think having a grounding in that being element, the feeling, the emotion, the connectedness to the now, that's something that runs alongside a practice, I find. So look, I'm still learning this stuff like all of us, right? It's a journey. And so some days one helps the other. So without the practice, the being is altered. Without the being, the practice falls away. And so it's like a dance between the two. And I think you have to have a practical discipline to meditate, to journal, to practice gratitude and affirmations and do all of these things that gets you, like you said, into the emotion of the goal and keeps you connected to the goal, but not in a way that's like abstract. I consider myself a very spiritual person, but I don't see myself as a spiritual guru in that sense. I feel like for me, it has to be practical. I have to be able to get up every day and live and be this person that I'm striving to be and to become, you know? And so it has to be that balance between what we do in every single moment and how we remain connected in that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so mindfulness, gratitude, jujitsu, is that one of the practices?
You wouldn't believe, yeah, how connected that makes you to your body. You know, that's like there isn't time when somebody's trying to choke you out there or break your arm. There just isn't time to kind of have this head chatter that says, "Hey, Colin, who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing?" You know.
Well, it's really interesting that you brought that up because you're the second person whose kindness really struck me right off the bat. And this other person who I'm also having on the show, John Vervaeke, also mentioned that he practices jujitsu. So there must be something to this practice.
I think there's endless list of things that you can do. The bottom line is feeling a connectedness to the body, because in reality, we are not the body. We are not the mind. You know, we are the witness consciousness, the seat of self, the higher self, however you want to describe it, right? We are something aside from each of those. And through the connectedness of the body and the mind and that place of witness consciousness that sits behind and above all of those, that's where you find that place of being in a stillness. It's a place that isn't bothered by all of the chatter. It's a place that isn't just constantly carried away by this feeling of that, and will she like me, and will he like that, and you just allow, you know, those things are still there, but you're in a different place where you're able to just kind of just see and respond to the thing that's in front of you, which is this moment right now, what Eckhart Tolle talks about in The Power of Now, right? It's this moment in front of you is the only one that you've got. It's the only one that matters. And so when you're able to, through that practice, stay connected and stay focused and stay in this moment, all of a sudden it feels different. So now the feeling of connectedness to what you're trying to do and be and achieve is almost effortless. That's what they talk about, be effortless effort, right? It's not something that you need to strive for. In striving for it, you miss it. And that's the difficulty I think a lot of people have is, and it's something I struggle with a lot, is sometimes you get caught up in practice. I'm trying to be this and I'm trying to be that and I'm trying to do that. And often it misses the mark, you know?
And yes, there's just a need at a certain point for surrender and just allowance. Like, here I am right now, and that's all part of it. That's all part of what I am called to be present with and allowed to move through me. And then trust that in that allowance, we will shift. You know, one of the practices that's really helped me to awaken more to greater sense of presence and that kind of magic that happens in the present moment is just slowing down. I just, you know, and I mean, I'm still, you know, kind of productive, inspired a lot and doing a lot of things, but I stopped kind of booking myself floor to ceiling. I started to create space between appointments, space between commitments. And I found that just giving myself that room to breathe, even if I wasn't necessarily taking that time to formally meditate, I just wasn't in that constant state of, I need to get there. I need to be here. I need to eat lunch. It was like it allowed for just the space for me to open my eyes a little bit and just kind of savor each moment. And there's been a lot of magic and kind of new consciousness just in the kind of slowing down and allowing and seeing myself not so much as I am the conductor who needs to have it, or the captain who needs to have it all figured out and is make calling all the shots, but rather a conduit where I'm just allowing life to move through me and surrendering and accepting, I mean, gosh, there are times when, I am not, my body and my mind and my energy are not cooperating. And, I want to be inspired. I want to be energetic. I want to be kind. And I'm just grumpy and, and tired and fatigued. And, that's all part of the allowance, I think. And the thing that we have to cultivate and surrender is, okay, I don't get it. I don't get why I'm feeling like this. And, how can I bring kindness to myself? And I think as we do, it allows us to create more kindness and patience with others. I mean, I think for me, my flaws more than anything have taught me about kindness and compassion.
And how much nicer is it when you're able, even when the energy's not there and you don't feel it, when you lean in to that? Because it's anti everything that we're programmed with, isn't it? It's against what our conditioning tells us, when the propensity is to be busy and get busy with busy things. The last thing we think about as being a valid thing is to stop and breathe and take a breath. And yet it's the most important thing that we can do. That's the difficulty, isn't it? But the difference when you practice that loving kindness to self first and foremost, then that's what makes the difference in how you show up in the world.
Yeah, really well said. Yeah, I think that, what you were sharing really speaks to what I find when I don't surrender is this sort of coercive and warlike relationship with myself, where I'm constantly kind of pressuring, uh, struggling, forcing, you've got, shaming. And I find that is just so draining and counterproductive. It doesn't actually achieve the thing that we think it does to engage with ourselves that way. We think that kind of pressure and shame motivates us, but it actually depletes us of the resourcing, of the energy, of the inspiration that we're actually trying to find. And so that's where it's like that surrender is so critical to re-energizing, restoring, replenishing our reserves. And we forget that. I don't know where this comes from, but our culture has a lot of emphasis on willpower and kind of top down, very, aggressive kind of how we relate to ourselves. And there's actually a lot of research that the concept of willpower is really not valid at all. There's no actual empirical research for it. And yet we all have this kind of myth that we can just logic our way and willpower our way. And if we were just mentally stronger. And actually, I find that the strength and the energy emerges in the allowance of not being so strong and energetic all the time. And then when we bow to that, the energy naturally kind of comes back online when it's ready. And that's again kind of with the everything is spiritual. It's like this kind of day-to-day dance with life, with our own energies, with our own bodies, with our own minds, with the circumstances of our lives. How do we kind of just allow and stop being so coercive? And what's the relationship between kind of agency and surrender? Because of course there are moments where we want to bring agency into our lives. We want to be purposeful and mindful and intentional, but that's not quite the same thing as this sort of coercive thing that happens. It's like knowing when is the right tool to use.
Absolutely. And I think in that you have to recognize the universal law of rhythm that's at play. To everything there is a time and a season under heaven, a time to live, a time to die. And I think in that, within the bounds of that rhythm, that universal law of rhythm, you have to accept that at the moment the sun is in the sky and the moon is not. You have to accept that it's the season of this or it's the season of that. And that's the hardest part, because we refuse to accept. It's like going outside in the morning sun and waving your fist at the sun and kind of saying, why are you not the moon? Why is it not dark right now? That's the futility of what we do to ourselves, really, because we're trying to fight against this natural rhythm that is the universe unfolding in front of us. And it is what it is and will always be what it is. No matter how hard we wave our fists, no matter how hard we protest, it will always be the way that it will. Now, within that, within the bounds of that, of course, we have agency, we have our expression of who we are. And that's where the fun, I think that's where it's fun, because within the bounds of the universal laws, you can play. That's what you're here for, you know? There's that saying that the earth is a place that souls go to evolve. That's what we're here to do. That's what it means to grow spiritually in awakening and to experience the fullness, the richness that is in front of you, but within the bounds of the law, you know, within the bounds of that rhythm and going with that flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that dance with life.
Yeah, it's so nice. It's like that's the whole like purpose of this short dance that we get to play out on earth in this physical body. It's you just got so much richness in front of you, and if you just accept the rhythm for the rhythm, you know, because people die and people get ill and things happen, and nothing is good nor bad. They're just things that happen, and all of these things happen to us in different measures to different degrees, and it's just things that happen, you know. We have to just flow with it.
Yeah, and I call that well, one principle that I use in that dance is what I call the reflection principle. It's the idea that every moment, every element of our lives is actually here to teach us something. Even our problems, all the things that we see as external are actually reflections of the internal. I think you actually were the first one to share the quote with me, as within, so without, as above, so below. You know, that old, I think that's a Hermetic kind of saying. Um, and what you originally were talking about reminds me of what I call the paradox of control, which is this idea that the more we strive to control things, the more out of control we feel. And the more we surrender and allow and accept, the more empowered we feel. And it's quite surprising. And it's a hard won lesson that I think we all have to encounter at some point.
And there's a beautiful quote by Marcus Aurelius: the impediment to action advances action. The obstacle, therefore, is the way. And how beautiful is it that everything that's put in front of us is a gift? No matter how we interpret it is our choice, right? But everything is a gift, like you just said. Everything, whether we deem it, label it a failure, whether we label it a success, or anything and everything in between, they're all pathways to growth. Everything is here. Everything is put in front of you so that you can grow.
Yeah, it's so amazing when you wake up to the orchestration in things and you begin to see that. And that's not, for me at least, a constant state. But the more I surrender, the more I begin to see that everything in my life, even the things that have felt painful, problematic, you know, things that I thought, oh, this is terrible, I'll never recover, have ultimately been in service. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing when you begin to witness that. And that's really what allows us to start to cultivate faith, is when we, you know, are able to become conscious of in advance, like, oh, here I am in another moment where I think there's no, you know, possible redemptive element to this experience. And we go, okay, God, okay, universe, okay, you know, I know you're teaching me something here. I'm going to trust you. I know there's something on the other side of this. And that's the kind of constant death and rebirth. You know, in the Bible, Paul says, I die daily. And I think that's just such a beautiful metaphor for, you know, just the constant laying on the altar, all of the things that, you know, the things that we identify with, our ego, our, you know, our sort of worldly aims that aren't really in alignment with our true values, and then just constantly recalibrating and iterating. And, you know, how do I keep on the path facing toward my North Star? How do I embody my values while kind of going after the thing that I feel called to in the world?
Yeah, and that's where the balance between enlightenment, chopping wood, fetching water, right? It's the same thing. You're constantly trying to find that that middle way, what Lao Tzu calls the way, right? The Tao. It's that place of balance that is elusive and actually doesn't exist. And that's part of the dance. You've got to constantly play with that, because no matter how many enlightened experiences you may have or may not have had or experienced, it's not actually about that. It's about your ability to remain in this moment right now that's in front of you. The moment where we took a pause a few minutes back, that moment's gone and will never be repeated again. This moment right now, this is the one that we're in, and this is the one that we have to respond and react to. And we will always not respond in the way that we expected. We will always trip up. We will always find ourselves failing and falling and not meeting the standards that we set ourselves. It's the nature of the mind. The mind will always pull us back and tell us that we're not good enough, or we're not doing enough, or we haven't been productive enough. And I think that's the daily challenge for us, is to be consistent in our approach to that. And consistency really is the key. And then look, it's one thing saying this, but then somebody dies, or you have a severe trauma, or something happens that's like big, man, then it's difficult not to fall off the wagon, so to speak, and things just kind of change. But that in itself is the gift. In 2013, Brooke, I had a business that was running multiple 7 figures a year in revenue. I had more money than I could spend. I was like doing really well in business. 2013, that business went bust, and I lost everything that I owned in the world. And we had the saddest part about all of that wasn't losing all of the material things I had. It was the 30 people that I employed whose families and children no longer had an income, right? That was the hardest thing to bear. When that first happened to me, I felt so traumatized and so much of a failure. I never thought I'd ever get over it. It felt like it was like a grief to me, because I loved running that business. And in the aftermath of that, now 8-9 years on from the fact, that was actually one of the best things that ever happened in my life, because through the fires of that, the aftermath, I actually became awake. I realized I've got feelings. I think, what are these funny things that have been stuff that I've been pushing away all of these years, What is this? And that actually was the starting path to what you would call like being self-aware, being awake, being alive. And only because of that failure that was labeled as a failure was I able to be the man I am today.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Death feels sometimes like a necessary precondition of rebirth, and it's in the moment, you don't see it. You don't know what's ahead of you. You only go, oh, I'm in pain. I'm decimated. I'm destroyed. And it's so incredible, though, when we are open to the lessons of life, when we have that mindset that invites inquiry. What opens up in that? It's like that decimation is the seeds of this new, I'm just thinking multiple metaphors here, garden, building, this kind of this new space, new creation, new self that emerges from the ashes, and I think for me, that's the image for me that is most salient, most representative of my experience of spirituality. It's just that, oh, die again, die and be reborn again, in little and big ways. I mean, that was a really huge and emblematic experience that you had of that. But then there's just the daily version. And I think, it comes back for me to character and integrity, because I think that we have to be fully committed to a process of opening ourselves up, colliding with life, and being willing to be changed by the encounter. And when our character is poised in that way, we can trust in the orchestration. We can trust that everything is in our highest good. But when we are not, oriented in that way, we can't see what life is offering us. And that's why I think the metaphor of awakening is so, apropos, because it's like, it's always been there. The gifts have always been there. the treasures that life is offering us are always right in front of us. And it's just learning to wake up, learning to pull the wool from our eyes, learning to see the thing that's there.
That's the beauty of our interactions with other human beings. You see the light, the brightness, the life, the spirit, the soul, the essence of who that other human being is. But all of us are clouded. We're all like a bit murky, a bit dusty. We've got like wrappings on. We've got like a bit of mud on us. You know, we're like, well, we're just a little bit, we're wrapped in this body, and we've got all of these things going on that just make things a little murky. You know, we don't see the brilliance, the pure brilliance and the light that is inside each one of us. And so often when you are able to see it in somebody else, or reflect it back to somebody else with their words, or a kindness, or a gesture, or something, what you're not giving anything to that person in reality. What's happening is a little piece of that murkiness, a little piece of that mask, that thing that's covering the brightness, that's covering who they are in essence. It's just breaking away. And then all of a sudden they shine brighter, you shine brighter as a result, you know. And that light that I spoke about in that young boy's eyes when I was teaching him that jiu-jitsu throw, that wasn't me. That was him realizing how special and beautiful and wonderful he is. And that's what we're talking about right now. It's recognizing that in ourselves and in others. And in doing so, we all get to shine brighter. You know, it's that Indra's net. Have you heard that? That whole concept of we are all these beautiful jewels in infinity, you know, stretched out to infinity. The brighter each one of us shines, the brighter the whole web, you know. Everybody benefits. We're all interconnected, the interconnectedness of all things. So when you bring happiness and joy and gratitude into the world through your energy and your intent, I benefit as a result of that, even though we're other sides of the globe. When we talk and I see your smile, I feel you in a very real way. It's not like, I don't know how to describe it even. It's indescribable, but it's tangible. And I think when you're able to connect to that connectedness by realizing, you know, we're all just doing the best that we can do. We're all just here on this journey. Oh, wow. Oh. It becomes easy, doesn't it? Becomes easy because your light shining makes my light shine brighter. That's what it means to have purpose. You're not, you know, when you're in service of others, you're literally helping them to see, wow, what I've got this bright light inside of me. What are you on about? What? And you can see it, and you see me, and you recognize that. Wow, what a gift you give people when you serve them in that way. You don't do anything. There's nothing that isn't already there. That light is already there. It's just about uncovering it and allowing it to shine. Whoa.
I love what you said, and so many different things came up as you were speaking. One was just this paradigm shift that I think we're all being invited to in this moment, from a scarcity kind of winner take all, you know, me or you mentality, to an abundance. More for me is more for you, is more for us. You know, the more that we all benefit, the more we all benefit. And so, you know, one of the things that I feel strongly about is changing that paradigm and inviting people, because the paradigm exists because of our projections, because we engage with it. It needn't exist in reality. It only exists because we're all playing that game, and we can choose to play a different game. We can choose to play the infinite game. And I think that that's really, you know, how do we change collective consciousness? How do we all really see and understand that the finite game is a construct, and that it's not real. It only exists. It's the matrix. It only exists because we're all saying it exists, and we're all acting like it exists, and we're all playing that game. And how do we really start to play a different game together collectively in action and in mind and in, spirit.
It starts with you, because you have to evolve your consciousness to a place of actually realizing that, I came across a wonderful term called sonder a number of years back. And it changed how I looked in the eyes of everybody I ever meet, and it has done ever since. This idea that everybody is a human being with feelings, with thoughts, with desires, with hopes, with dreams, with all of these wonderful things and experiences wrapped around who they are. And just the reverence of that makes you see people in different lights, And I think if you work on self enough to have that realization that we are all interconnected, that your pain is my pain, my love is your love, and the more that we share, the more that we lean in to that energy of abundance rather than scarcity, like you mentioned, then goodness flows from that. Magic happens on the invisible rather than the material. So the invisible is what dictates the material, and the more that we put our energy and intention into the positive in the invisible, the more that then breaks through into the material, into the matrix, right? The more we're able to break into that material. And it is like you said, it is a construct. It's not real. It's part of that, what they call Maya, that delusion that we all exist in. And people that haven't had that experience yet, they exist in a state of like Maya, of delusion. Before that business that I ran went bust, I was in a state of Maya. I was chasing money. I was trying to be a multi-millionaire. That was the only thing that drove me. If you'd have spoke to me about spirituality back then, I would have been like, what are you even talking about? What is that? Right? I wasn't ready at that moment in my life. And so we have to appreciate that everybody has. We started our conversation with the universal law of rhythm, right? To everything there is a time and a season. And that beautiful saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And so if we see somebody that is shouting hate and talking completely in Maya, right? Not aware, it's just a timing thing. It doesn't mean that person may not be, wow, one of the most spiritually advanced people by the end of their lifetime. We've just met them in a snapshot, a moment where they're dealing with the thing that's in front of them in the best possible way that they can. And no matter what's in front of you, if we breathe love and compassion into it, boy, do things change.
I heard that when Mother Teresa was asked, how do you serve the world? How do you change the world? She said, go home and love your family.
Nice.
And that's it. That's the work, right? The work
Yeah.
is so deeply individual. To be in greatest service of the collective, we have to start in our own minds and hearts. We cannot, it doesn't mean that we have to be perfect before we serve the world. Of course not. Of course, we serve the world, in our imperfection. But the idea that, the change is out there is part of the problem. When we assume sort of an ultimate position of responsibility, I think that is what opens up our consciousness to do the greatest amount of collective change. So it's a bit paradoxical, perhaps, in that collective awakening requires us as individuals to wake up and transform our consciousness. And it's so simple, but it's so deep and so profound and so complex in another way, right? Like we complicate it. It's actually not very complicated.
It's not that lovely misquoted Gandhi that says that be the change that you want to see in the world. It starts and ends with you. You can literally change the world just by changing the way that you speak to yourself, the way that you show up, the way that you hold yourself, the way that you incessantly pull yourself down and don't share love and compassion for self. It all starts and ends there. When you can do that genuinely, then it instantly and immediately spills out into your interactions with others, because you love yourself. How many times do we tell ourselves, I, I wrestle with this all the time, Brooke. Oh, you can't do that. Nobody wants to hear what you've got to say. Who do you think you are, Colin? You know, and that these little things, they come up, they creep, they niggle away at you all the time. And I think that's where the practice comes in, just to reset and just find that place of power, of love and compassion for self, so that you can do those things anyway, you know?
It reminds me of that Wayne Dyer quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And you said to me a long time ago, when you smile, the world smiles back at you. You know, that back to that reflection principle,
Mm,
this thing that happens where we really are co-creating reality. Like how, as you said, how you show up in the world, how we show up in the world really dictates how other people show up in response to us. So we actually have so much more power than we believe that we do, because we don't necessarily know how to heal ourselves and how to relate differently. So we don't have an experience of co-creating reality until we can do some very deep healing, deprogramming, shifting our self-limiting core beliefs, really reckoning with the traumas that have shaped this way of seeing the world, this old paradigm, the finite game. And I think that, it's so powerful though, when you start to feel like, in some ways, while at the same time you're in a state of surrender, you're also you start to feel more like the architect of your own destiny. And it's quite profound, at least for me, living for so many years feeling so deeply disempowered, so deeply in pain, so deeply confused by, why it was that I was showing up in a way that wasn't being received. Because my heart was always service, my heart was always love, my heart was always, wanting to connect with people. But for so many years, until I did my own healing work and therapy, I just didn't realize how many unconscious defenses were dictating the way that I was showing up and the way that other people were responding. I wasn't aware of these things. And so I was just constantly perplexed. And then the world seemed like a cruel place. But as I began to kind of unearth, my truer essence and heal, I began to really co-create new experiences. And it's so striking how for so many years it was like, I can't find any good people. Los Angeles is such a superficial place. People don't share my values. And now it feels like everywhere I turn, I'm having these incredible spiritual conversations, meeting beautiful, kind people. And it's not a coincidence. It's really kind of the fruit that you yield, when you do this work. It's like it comes to harvest, but it often takes many years and it happens in fits and starts. It's not linear.
it's not linear. It's like traveling up a mountain, and imagine a conical mountain. We walk around the mountain at the foothills, and we're traversing up and down and up and down and moving our way around and up the mountain. And we see a village across to the side of us. And then we carry on our journey. And a little while later, we see the same village. And we think, what are we doing? We've passed this village. We are going backwards here. We're not progressing. What's going on? And we're not realizing that we're traveling around the mountain. We're seeing the same vista from different perspectives. So that's the journey. That's the essence of the journey. We're traveling up the mountain and we're making upwards progress, but it never feels like it, or it rarely feels like it. Occasionally we'll get a glimpse of a glorious sunset or something that makes us stop in our tracks. I go running early in the morning, and often, I can't tell you the amount of times, Brooke, where I've literally stopped and had a tear rolling down my eyes at the sky. The sky, it just makes me realize, how lucky I am to be stood in this place and witnessing this beauty that's unfolding in front of me. Occasionally we get moments like that. But for the most part, we're going, well, I've been here before. I'm going backwards. I'm going down the mountain here. Why aren't I at the top, But if we view it as that continuous traversing around and around the mountain, and we see the same things from different elevations, that for me is a real nice way to be acceptant of what we're seeing, and what we're experiencing in this moment. Sometimes we have to go down to go up, and that's okay. That's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all part of it. It's all part of, sometimes the ways that we go down deep in us, and they expand our ability to be with our own emotional experience, our own flawed humanity, and therefore to serve others and connect with others. And so those wounds that we carry, the wound is where the light comes in, right?
And
Those
it
wounds
would
that
be
we
too
carry are
easy just to
gifts.
push, be too easy to push them away, wouldn't it? And push them down, push them away, lean away from them and ignore them. But when you do that, when you're brave enough and you're courageous enough to do that, that hard thing, what a great blessing that is, because that's, like you say, that's when those things peel away and the essence, the brilliance behind it is allowed to shine through. That's what they mean when they say the obstacle is the way. Those things, those resistances, those things that you're feeling, they are the pathway. Whether we choose to lean in because it's uncomfortable or not, that's the journey, isn't it? That's the journey we're all on. Look at the difference you just mentioned there about having done that work on that healing, that internal work, how different the conversations are, how different the physical world is for you as a result of doing the work. That's all there is to it for any one of us. And you know what makes it so special for every single soul that you meet are those wounds, those scars, those things that make you you, because they're not bad things that we need to get rid of. That's who you are. You are that person that has had that experience that no other soul on the planet in the whole 13.8 billion years or whatever that the planet's existed, and all of the years ahead of us that the planet will exist, no other soul has ever had the experiences that you've had, nor ever will, in exactly the same mix, in exactly the same moment, at exactly the same time. Wow, what a gift that is for you, to love and embrace who you are, warts and all, right? I say to my clients, our goal is to become the truest expression of self, not to be their expression, his expression, her expression, our own truest expression of self, unashamedly, unapologetically. And that really is the journey that we're on, isn't it? It's just that striving to be me.
It's really about recovering or coming back into contact with our own preciousness, our own childlike wonder, our own play, our own kind of unfettered, expression. And that is really deep, though. I mean, it's really profound. I love spending time with my niece because I feel like I have permission, and it's not a conscious permission. It's like this unconscious permission to be silly, to be dumb, to play, to move in crazy ways, to make weird noises, to imagine, to not be so logical, to not be so curated, to not have to be so perfect. It's so relieving. And I recognize that that sense that I don't have permission normally is self-imposed. It's not real. I'm bringing it into things. I've internalized it, and now I'm projecting it. And when I spend time with her, it invites me into this childlike play that I think is really, it's so precious. It's so life-filling. And I think that really, as we deepen spiritually, that's where we find ourselves, is in more and more play.
Definitely. Playful curiosity, that childlike curiosity for life. That's wonder. That's awe. That's the place. That's the energy where imagination lives. That's where creativity lives. That's where the connectedness to all things exists. And so the more that you're able to lean into that, man, that really is the key. Who says the dog can't bark while you're recording a podcast? Who says life has to unfold the way that it does? Life unfolds in the most beautiful way that it ever could do. And it unfolds exactly as it should. And so allowing that unfolding and then playing within that, whoa, with curiousness, with wow, with gay abandon. And there's no this is the whole thing of our growth through childhood into maturity as an adult, is that we lose the connectedness to that a lot, don't we? We put layers on, we put masks on. When I'm in church, I must sit like this and behave like that. And when I'm sat in a courtroom, I'm going to do this, you know, and we have all of these learned behaviors and ways of being and social norms and all of these different programmings that form the paradigm of who we are. So how wonderful it is to connect. That's why music's so powerful and stories are so powerful, because we're able just to let go for a time. And when we let go, we're there instantly. We're in that place that we all go through our lives just finding glimpses of, in a sunset, in a moment, in a shared moment, you know, glimpses. We see in glimpses. Paul said we see just reflections, elements, through mirrored glass almost of what it means and what actually is really there. And so, you know, that's just part of the process. When you can feel that playfulness, there's nothing like it. When you're just laughing so hard and you're dancing with your niece, man, what a great feeling. What a great feeling. That's what it means to be alive. And that's part of our challenge, is to spend time in those moments, but to strive to be that who we truly are, you know. And we're not these stuffy, very righteous, you know, people who go through life doing all of these things in the way that we're supposed to do them, you know. It's like you've got to be you, and playfulness. Wow, what a powerful way to tap into that imagining.
The dance, you know, we've been using the metaphor of the dancing with life. And I walk my dog every morning, and there are people who are part of a program called Chrysalis, which is kind of a homeless rehabilitation program, and they pick up trash and they wear these orange, you know, vests. And there was this morning that this guy was picking up trash. He had his cart, you know, with a wheeled trash can and like a trash picker upper, or whatever those are called. And he was literally dancing. He was literally dancing as he picked up trash. And wow, that for me is like, if you can dance while you pick up trash, you've got something figured out. I almost wanted to stop him. I hope I see him again. I really I'd like to stop him and maybe interview him, maybe learn a little bit more about his secrets.
Yeah, what's your secret? But you're right. Look, I was in the gym the other day, and there was this lady in the gym. She had these big headphones on like I'm wearing now, and she was doing these things with the weights, and she put the weights down. And I couldn't help but, I was running on the treadmill, I couldn't help but like be caught by her, because she must have been, I don't know what she was doing. She was in the moment, and she was just dancing away from the weights over to this place where they do the yoga and the cool downs. And she was just lost in that moment. Just like the guy that you're talking about there, she was like nodding her head and shaking. And it was beautiful to see, because there was zero inhibition. It was just pure joy of life. And wow, I wish I could be that free, Brooke.
Right. It's so interesting how we put these self-imposed limitations, even though on ourselves, even though when we see others, it just wakes us up. It brings us to life. It brings us joy. And yet we go, oh no, I can't do that. I can't be so free. I can't express in that way. I need permission. You know, and it's just such an invitation though of, wait a second, who are you performing for, and who are you hiding from? Like, you know, like that's all just made up. That's all just an idea you have in your head. Like nobody cares. And even if they do, who cares? You know, like even if someone is judging you, that's more about them than it is about you.
Absolutely. And so that's the journey that we're all on, isn't it? That's the journey that we continue to be on. Dancing, man. I mean, I consider myself quite a creative, expressive guy, but dancing, that's like, I would be like some robotic guy. I'm not a dancer. I've got zero rhythm, you know. I'm like dreadful. But just the ability to let go of inhibitions and express and explore in whatever creative mode works for you. Wow, such power in that. such power.
Mm. Well, I'm noticing that we're coming to the end of our time here. I'm so grateful that we were able to connect today. It's wonderful to see you. And thank you so much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure, Brooke. Absolute pleasure. Love the conversation. That's one of the most interesting and expressive things that we can do, is to share the experience that we're having, because in that you're making an impression, you're making an impact, you're putting energy out into the world that can change people's lives through the change that you see in yourself. Oh, what a gift. I don't want the conversation to end. It's like that. This is why we're here. This is exactly why we're here.
Mm. Yeah, it's that emergent magic that happens that neither of us can fully source as individuals separately, but this thing happens in conversation, in the dance, in that co-creation that is larger than the sum of its parts. And that's a really beautiful place to end. And I hope we can do it again.
Thank you so much.